I am Vitaly Portnikov. The countries of the European Union and the United Kingdom have imposed new serious sanctions against Russia in the wake of yesterday's phone conversation between the presidents of the United States and the Russian Federation, as well as the conversation that US President Donald Trump had after that call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders. According to observers, after Donald Trump stated that he considered the Russian president's agreement to begin negotiations between Russia and Ukraine without any intermediaries a great success, and did not mention the need for a ceasefire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. There was silence on the line of communication between America and Europe. It is clear that European leaders did not even know what to say to the President of the United States, who, in his usual manner, is trying to present yet another diplomatic defeat as a great diplomatic achievement. By the way, it is worth recalling that we recently witnessed something similar after the attacks by the US Air Force on the positions of the terrorist organization Ansarullah the Houthis in Yemen. After it became clear that the attacks were not causing any serious consequences for the Houthis' capabilities, but instead were leading to further losses of US aircraft and shelling of American ships in the Red Sea, the US administration entered into separate agreements with the Houthis, who agreed not to target US ships specifically in the future. When Donald Trump was asked what he thought about the security of Israel, which continues to be shelled from Yemen with ballistic missiles, the President of the United States calmly said that he was not interested in it. And we are now seeing roughly the same approach when it comes to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Putin continues to reject all of Trump's proposals, and eventually the President of the United States accepts the Russian leader's stance and begins to characterize it as a real success of his own diplomacy and approaches. Thus, the European Union has no choice but to continue its policy of sanction pressure on Moscow. However, there is no longer any hope for new sanctions from the United States, because during his conversation with the leaders of Germany, France, Italy, Finland, and the President of the European Commission, Donald Trump said that he does not intend to impose new sanctions, as he does not want to interfere with negotiations between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And as we can see, the surprise of the European leaders at the position of their American counterpart had no effect whatsoever on Donald Trump's own stance. Meanwhile, the Kremlin itself is clearly satisfied with the achievements that the Russian president managed to secure during his conversation with his American counterpart. The main thing the Kremlin will do now is to buy time. Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov has already emphasized that there is no deadline for preparing the so-called memorandum, which is supposed to pave the way for a ceasefire and future negotiations. Of course, everyone wants to do this as quickly as possible, but the devil is in the details. Peskov emphasized, responding to journalists' questions about the possibility of preparing such a memorandum, and yet another quite real obstacle that the Kremlin is trying to put forward is the statement that in order to work on the memorandum, Ukraine must also agree to the main directions of the peace agreement that will be proposed in the Russian capital. There is, of course, nothing surprising about such an approach. Such actions by Donald Trump could have been expected given his communication with his Russian counterpart. The most important thing is how quickly Europeans will be able to recover from yet another political shock related to the obvious affinity of the President of the United States of America for the President of the Russian Federation. After all, it is clear that both the European Union and the United Kingdom can continue to impose new sanctions against the Russian Federation, creating serious obstacles to the normal functioning of the economy of this aggressive state, and at the same time leaving Donald Trump with no illusions that he will be able to cooperate with Moscow without ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. Or, of course, it will be cooperation between two isolated economies which will be forced to circumvent all the problems that will be created for the Russian economy itself by the European partners of the United States. For example, the same SWIFT system from which the Russian Federation was disconnected could begin cooperating again with the Russian financial institutions, but only if the European Union agrees to it. The vast majority of frozen Russian assets, as is well known, are also located in the banking system of the European Union, not the United States. Restoring the energy system of the Russian Federation by selling gas or oil to European countries 7. If American companies show interest in returning to the Nord Stream schema is also not possible without agreement on how European governments view this. And there are plenty more examples like this. That's why now, when Trump and Putin talk about trade between themselves, they cannot bypass Europe. The survival not only of Europe but of democracy itself will depend on the resilience of European leaders and their willingness to stand up not only to Putin's aggressive policies, but also to the complete lack of values and ignorance of United States President Donald Trump and his closest circle. In a situation where Trump's United States has no intention of defending this democracy, but instead uses the current global circumstances to strengthen Donald Trump's own power in the style of the most repugnant authoritarian rulers of our time, whom Trump continues to speak about with such enthusiasm and respect, both during his first and now his second term in the Oval Office of the White House. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe, follow me on social media, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Donatella to support these resources. Use sponsorship here on YouTube. Good luck.